My name is Autumn Wilder. I am 29 years old. And for most of my life, my own family called me the disappointment. Not once. Not as a slip of the tongue in a bad moment. But again and again. Like it was simply a fact about me. The same way you'd mention someone's eye color. My father, Richard Wilder, built a well-known investment firm from the ground up. My mother, Diane, was the kind of woman who could tell you a person's net worth just by glancing at their handbag. And my younger brother, Tyler, was the golden child. Charming, confident, and shaped perfectly into the mold my parents had built for their children. A mold I never quite fit into. Tyler got a brand new car for his 21st birthday. A glossy black sports car that cost more than most people make in 2 years. I remember standing in the driveway, filming the whole thing on my phone because, as my father put it, Autumn's good with that kind of thing. I was 23 at the time, working 2 jobs, and driving a second-hand hatchback with a cracked side mirror held on with tape. When I congratulated Tyler that day, he laughed and pulled me into a side hug. "Don't worry. Cease. Maybe one day you'll catch up." He said it warmly, like a joke between siblings. It still hurt like a slap. That was the shape of my whole childhood. Tyler got the downtown apartment paid in full. Tyler got the job at Dad's firm the week after graduation. Tyler got the $2,000 watch as a just because gift. I didn't even get invited to his welcome dinner. My mother told me it was more of a professional event and that I probably wouldn't fit in. I never fit in. That was the story of my life. Always standing just outside the family photo. The comments got sharper as I got older. Dressed up as jokes, so no one could call them cruel. When I left college to start my own company, my parents called it a phase. When that first company folded 2 years later, my father emailed me an article titled, "Times Why Most Startups Fail Times," with the caption, "Thought this might be useful." My mother told relatives I was still finding my footing, which was her polite way of saying unemployed. At family gatherings, Tyler liked to ask, in front of everyone, "So how's the next big idea coming along?" followed by a knowing look at our mother, who would smile like she was comforting a child who'd lost a spelling bee. I learned to laugh along, because arguing only proved their point. Bitter, sensitive, unsuccessful. That was my label, and nothing I said ever seemed to change it. Still, I kept building, quietly, while Tyler posted pictures from company retreats in places I couldn't afford to visit. I was coding at 2 in the morning in my studio apartment, when my father called to suggest I come work under him for a few years and learn something real. I declined, as politely as I could. He said, "Suit yourself," and hung up. I could hear the disappointment in his voice. Not anger. Something colder. Pity. The turning point began quietly. Months before the Thanksgiving that changed everything. I had been building a small piece of software. A tool that helped local businesses manage customer data without hiring a whole tech team. It grew faster than I ever expected. Within a year, investors were reaching out. I didn't tell my family. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I already knew how it would go. They would either mock it, or worse, pretend to support it while quietly waiting for it to collapse. By that point, I had stopped attending most family events. The few I did go to were out of guilt more than desire. But that year, my mother called and insisted, "It's been too long. Autumn. Everyone would love to see you." The word everyone sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced it. A small, foolish part of me hoped this time might be different. So I said yes. The dinner was held at the Ridgemont Club, the kind of place with folded cloth napkins and servers in white gloves. I arrived in the only blazer I owned, a little wrinkled from sitting balled up in my car. My family was already seated at a long table near the window. Tyler waved me over with a grin. "Look who finally showed up." Everyone laughed. I smiled and sat down, telling myself I wouldn't let it get to me. It didn't take long for the old rhythm to start. My father asked Tyler about his quarterly numbers. My mother complimented Tyler's girlfriend on her handbag. Then, almost as an afterthought, "So, Autumn, what have you been up to?" "Still working on some tech projects," I said simply. My father raised an eyebrow. "Tech projects? So, no real job yet?" Tyler chuckled. "She's an entrepreneur, Dad. That's the new word for unemployed." The table laughed. I felt the old familiar burn in my chest but kept smiling. My mother patted my hand. "We're proud of you for trying. Sweetheart, not everyone is built for the easy path." The evening rolled on, full of little jabs wrapped in humor. Then came the toast. Tyler stood, glass raised, voice carrying just far enough for the next table to hear. "To family," he said, "and to my sister, Autumn. Maybe one day you'll catch up." Laughter rippled around the table. My hand tightened around my glass, but I said nothing. I just smiled. A real smile this time, though none of them understood why. 15 minutes later, as dessert was served, the television above the bar cut to a breaking business headline. Local tech startup acquired for $60 million. Founder Autumn Wilder. The room seemed to slow down. My father froze mid-sip. My mother's smile faltered. Tyler turned toward the screen, his face draining of color, then looked back at me. "Wait," he said. "That's you." That was the moment everything shifted. Not just at that table, but in my life. My father recovered first, clearing his throat. "Well," he said stiffly, "that explains why you've been so busy." He laughed, but it came out dry and hollow. My mother's voice sharpened. "Autumn, why didn't you tell us? Do you know how it feels to hear this from a television screen?" "You never asked," I said quietly. Tyler stared at me like I'd started speaking a language he didn't know. "You built that. I thought you were still freelancing." "It took a few years," I said, "but it worked out." My father leaned back, eyes narrow. "So you made a deal behind our backs and didn't think we deserved to know." "It wasn't behind anyone's back," I said. "I just didn't think it would matter to you. You've made it pretty clear where I stand in this family." The table split into two camps for the rest of the night. My parents and Tyler on one side, cold and tight-lipped. Me on the other, trying to disappear into my napkin. They left before finishing dessert. At the valet stand, my father said only, "We'll talk tomorrow." "My office." I nodded, though I had no idea why I agreed. The next morning I had over 20 missed calls. When I arrived at my father's office, his assistant handed me a visitor badge, something I don't think she'd ever handed Tyler in his life. My father sat at the head of a long conference table, papers spread in front of him. "You blindsided us, Autumn," he said. "Do you understand that people are calling clients, asking why we never mentioned a daughter in tech? Do you know how that looks? I didn't build this company for appearances," I said. "Everything you do reflects on this family." He snapped. "You wouldn't have the education to build anything if I hadn't paid for it." That wasn't even true. I had paid off my own loans after leaving school, after he cut me off the moment I dropped out. But arguing that now would only feed the narrative he'd already written about me. He slid a folder across the table. "I've spoken to some people. We bring your company under the firm's umbrella. You stay the face of it." "Of course. But Tyler manages the financial side. It would make a wonderful family story." "You want to take credit," I said flatly. "Don't be dramatic. It's business." He studied me the way he studied a losing investment. "You could use guidance managing that kind of money. Let us help." "By us." He meant himself. I stood. "I'm good on my own." "Thank you." That evening, my mother called, her voice syrupy with concern. "Honey, your father just worries. 60 million is a lot for one person to handle. Maybe let your brother help." "You mean let Dad handle it through him?" I said. She sighed like I was the unreasonable one. I hung up. But the calls didn't stop. Tyler sent a long message about joining forces and building something together. I ignored it. Then came another dinner invitation. This time just to talk things through. Against my better judgment. I went. At their house. Surrounded by photos of Tyler's graduation. Tyler's awards. Tyler shaking hands with my father's colleagues. My father laid out the real pitch. Tyler leaned forward. Sincere. I've got the connections. You've got the tech. 50-50 partnership. I bring investors and infrastructure. You handle product. My company was already sold. I said. There's nothing to split. Tyler smiled easily. Come on. You'll start something new. We can back you properly this time. My mother placed her hand over mine. Family should help each other. Autumn. I looked at their expectant faces and understood. Finally. That this had never been about pride in me. It was about control. They couldn't stand that I had done something entirely without them. Thanks for dinner. I said. Standing. But I don't need managing partners. I left before anyone could argue further. Within days, I learned my father had begun introducing himself around town as a key early backer of my company. When I confronted him, he brushed it off as helping establish credibility. Then Tyler posted a long message online about family success stories, attaching a photo from Thanksgiving with a caption thanking me for carrying the family name into tech. We had never worked together. Not even close. But he was already telling people we had. That's when I understood they weren't trying to share the spotlight. They were trying to take it entirely. Then came the part that still makes my stomach turn to think about. I was at a coffee shop finishing paperwork from the acquisition when I got an alert from my bank, a request for temporary financial oversight of my accounts. Filed under something called Family Fiduciary Authority. The request had come from my father's firm. I called him immediately. He answered calmly. Like he'd expected it. You're overreacting, he said. It's standard oversight. 60 million isn't a toy. Autumn. You're young and impulsive. We're protecting what's ours. What's yours? I repeated slowly. He hesitated. Just barely. You represent this family's name. The company's success reflects on all of us. It doesn't belong to you. I said, and hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. Strange things kept happening after that. My accountant called about duplicate inquiries into my tax filings. My lawyer mentioned someone requesting details of my non-disclosure agreements. An anonymous caller reached out to one of my old investors, asking whether I had ever mishandled funds. It all came to a head at what I thought was a networking brunch. When I arrived, I found my parents, Tyler, and a family acquaintance named Walter Bennett already seated. My father wanted me to sign onto a joint family trust, with Tyler managing the finances. When I refused and threatened to make their interference public if they touched my accounts again, my father scoffed. Don't threaten me. You wouldn't dare embarrass this family. Maybe I won't have to, I said, and walked out. That night, everything I had built nearly came apart. A forged internal document began circulating online, claiming I had falsified financial records before the sale. The files were fabricated, but convincing. My head of operations, a sharp, steady woman named Priya, called me in a panic as investors began asking questions. Within an hour, I traced the leak to an IP address tied to my father's firm. The next morning I walked into his office without knocking. He didn't even look surprised. You went too far, I said. I protected our name, he said flatly. I simply redirected the narrative. Tyler, leaning in the doorway, added, relax. Nobody actually believes that stuff. Then why do it? I asked. Because you needed reminding, Tyler said. You don't get to cut us out. A few days later, an unsigned envelope arrived at my apartment. Inside was a printed email exchange between Tyler and one of the executives handling my acquisition, offering to negotiate directly if I stepped back, suggesting the family would make a better public face for the company. It was signed. Plainly. Tyler Wilder. That was the moment any remaining doubt disappeared. They weren't trying to share what I built. They wanted to take it. The following weeks were brutal. The acquisition payment was frozen pending review. Anonymous sources close to my father's firm suggested to reporters that the stress of the deal had left me unstable and questioned my ability to manage the company long-term. Headlines called it a family feud. Tyler gave interviews describing me as brilliant but in need of grounding. I was being rewritten. In real time. From founder to liability. I stopped answering calls. I rented a small cabin 2 hours outside the city. No reporters. No noise. Just space to think. In that stillness, something other than grief began to take shape. Not anger exactly. Focus. I reached out quietly to an old contact. A cybersecurity consultant named Marcus who owed me a favor from years back. I told him about the forged documents and the anonymous leaks. Within 2 weeks, he traced the origin of the forged files to a laptop registered on my father's firm's network, uploaded during hours when Tyler was supposedly meeting clients off-site. He had tried to route the upload through the firm's proxy to cover his tracks, but the timestamps didn't lie. Meanwhile, an independent auditor I'd hired confirmed there had never been any irregularities in my company's financial history. That gave us leverage. Slowly, quietly, the tide began to turn. The acquisition review cleared me completely, and the final payment was released. I didn't celebrate loudly. Instead, I made a few quiet moves. I opened a new holding company, Wren Holdings, with no public connection to my family name, and transferred every asset and future project into it. Then I started something new, a company called Northline, an automation platform for growing startups. Exactly the tool I wished I'd had years earlier. Within months, it was valued at well over $10 million. Entirely under a name that had nothing to do with Wilder. While I quietly rebuilt, Tyler's story started falling apart without my help. Journalists began noticing inconsistencies in his public claims. One outlet published a piece questioning irregularities in his firm's public relations efforts connected to the rumors about me. His own arrogance did more damage than I ever could have. I was eventually invited to speak at a leadership summit, held, with some irony, at the very same country club where that Thanksgiving dinner had taken place. I walked in this time, not as the outcast in a wrinkled blazer, but as the keynote speaker, introduced as the founder of a company worth far more than anyone at that table once believed I was capable of building. Midway through my talk, I noticed Tyler near the back of the room, arms crossed, trying to look casual. Afterward, he found me near the bar. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, forcing a laugh. "You've been busy. Impressive stuff." I didn't answer. He shifted. Softer now. "Dad's firm is under investigation. Bad trades. Cleon Luss. He's not handling it well." "That's unfortunate," I said, and left it there. That night I drove home in silence. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt the quiet weight of knowing none of them had apologized, or even acknowledged what they'd done. A month later, a journalist who had been investigating my father's firm for months reached out. She sent me a file, internal records, recordings, transfer histories, all of it pointing to illegal transfers and manipulated client funds tied directly to my father and, through him, to Tyler. I sat with that file for a long time before deciding what to do with it. I sent it to her. And within days, the story broke publicly. Federal investigators raided my father's firm. Assets were frozen. Tyler, it turned out, had already begun cooperating as a witness to protect himself, which told me everything I needed to know about him. A short time later, a plain envelope arrived at my apartment with no return address. Inside was a single page from my mother. Her handwriting was careful but shaky. "Autumn, your father has been charged. They came for him last night. Tyler gave them everything to protect himself. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted you to know we never stopped loving you. We just never understood you. I hope you find peace. Please remember us the way we were before all of this." I read it once, then set it down. There was no satisfaction in it. Only a quiet, heavy stillness. My father was later found guilty of fraud and obstruction of justice and sentenced to several years in federal prison. Tyler avoided prison through his cooperation agreement, but his career never recovered. Every firm that once courted him quietly cut ties. My mother sold the family home and moved out of state. I never heard from her again. As for me, I didn't have to lift a finger once the truth came out. Everything they had built to bury me became the thing that buried them instead. Months later, I visited the Ridgemont Club one final time. Not for a dinner. Not for closure exactly. Just to see it in daylight. I sat at the same table where Tyler had once raised his glass and told me maybe one day I'd catch up. I ordered a coffee. Stayed for a while. Then left a note on the table before walking out. It read simply Times, guess I finally caught up. Walking out into the cold afternoon air, I understood something I hadn't before. The point was never to watch them fall. The point was learning to stand on my own, without needing anyone's permission to call it success. That was the end of being the family disappointment, and the beginning of everything that came after.